So I'm gonna cook. This is a baking project that I'm gonna do, and you can watch me. And I chose a recipe that's very simple. It's called lemon cranberry scones. And scones are, they are a little bit like a muffin, but denser, not as fluffy, and not quite as sweet. But these scones have like an icing on top. So they do wind up being pretty sweet. And the reason I chose this recipe, it's something that people eat for breakfast, but it's because I happen to have these ingredients at home. So what you want to do when you're looking for a recipe is something that's simple and something that has the ingredients that you've got at home. Okay, so while we do this, I'm going to go over fractions because there always are some fractions in every baking project, every cooking of any kind. So we will go over that. The very first thing that you do after you've chosen a basic recipe, asked your parents for permission, and figured out if that recipe is something you can do with what you've got at home, is you wash your hands. All right, so what's fun to know is that 100 years ago, Dr. Maria Montessori figured out the way to teach children how to wash their hands. It always goes like this in the classroom. Front, back, wrist, finger, 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 finger. Front, back, wrist, finger, 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 finger. And 100 years later, now, during a pandemic, they say, please do all that. And then 2 more things besides. Put the tips of your fingers in the palm of one hand and scrub there. And then the other fingers, tips of fingers into palm. And last thing, put the fingers all the way together and rub back and forth so you get the in between all the fingers. And the reason that Montessori knew such a great way to wash your hands is because she was a doctor. Okay, so now you have very clean hands, and one of the very important things to do is to read the whole recipe all the way through. And I would recommend that you read it out loud and have someone nearby who can help you if you get stuck in your reading, if any of the numbers or any of the words are confusing, because you really need to read every single part of it all the way through so there aren't any surprises. Once you've read the recipe, you can get out everything that you need. Get out all of your ingredients and get out all of your equipment. Some children's cookbooks have a list of ingredients and a list of equipment, but most recipes just have the ingredients, and you have to read the whole recipe to find out what equipment you need. So I have out my bowls, measuring cups, measuring spoons, and then over there some things to stir with. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the recipe, which I wrote down on a whiteboard. Okay, so these are all the ingredients for the scones, and then these are the ingredients for the glaze, the lemon glaze that goes on top, which is like the icing. And it can be pretty confusing when you look at the recipe and you see all these numbers and lines. There's a 1 and a 2 and a slanted line and a 3 cups flour, and there's a 2 and a 1, a slanted line and another 2, and a T and an S and a P, baking powder. We have a lot of interesting looking numbers here, and I want to remind you how fractions go. At school, when we write a fraction, we don't have that kind of slanty line. That's why it's confusing. The 1 is just plain a 1, but this part should, if we were at school, would be a 2, and then under it a straight across line, and then under that a 3. So that says 2/3. And for that one, the 1 would be on top, and then the straight line, and the 2 right under it, and that says 1/2. Over here, we have a 3 and a 4, so the 3 goes on top, straight line, and 4. And that's 3/4 or 3/4. So every time in a recipe, and you'll probably see this a lot in recipes, when you see a smallish number and then this slanted line and then another number, in your mind or even on paper, if it helps, put the first number on top and then the line straight across and the second number underneath. And then it will look like a fraction that you're used to. So now that we understand what they should look like, let's figure out how to make them happen when we are cooking. So we're going to go over to the fraction circles, which you'll also recognize from school. Okay, so this is similar to the metal fraction circles that we have at school, and I made them out of paper. This is the 1. It's a whole 1, like it would be 1 cup or 1 teaspoon. And then this circle has been cut exactly into 2 pieces, 2 equal pieces, and each one is 1/2. And the way we show 1/2 is the 1 on top, and then the line, and the 2 underneath. This one has been cut into 3 equal pieces, and each one is 1/3. It has the 1 and the line and the 3. The number on top shows how many. I only have 1 right now. The number underneath tells you how many of them make a whole circle. 3 of them make a whole circle. 1/3. So that's why we write it that way. This one has been cut into 4 equal pieces. So it's 1/4, 1 on top and 4 on the bottom, because it takes 4 of them to make a whole. This one has a very common nickname. It is 1/4. It's been cut into quarters. So you will very often hear people, and you'll probably hear me say it because it's a hard habit to break, instead of calling it fourths, people call them quarters. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So that's something to keep in mind. So what do we do when it says 2/3? So we have to find our thirds, and we can't just have 1 of them. We need to have 2 of them. So there's what 2/3 would be like. It's a pretty big part of the circle. Or what if we had to have 3/4 or quarters? We would need 1, 2, 3 of the pieces. So that's a lot of the circle. So now when we are looking at the ingredients and figuring out how much to get, we can keep in mind what these pieces will look like. And we can start looking for those same numbers on the cups and teaspoons that we're going to use for measuring. All right, let's go back to our ingredients. Okay, so we have 2 different types of measuring cups, and we have measuring spoons. These measuring cups are for anything that is dry, like flour or sugar, and there's a set of them. This one says 1 cup. This one has that fraction on it, 1 and a line and a 2, 1/2 cup. This one has the 1 and the line and the 3, 1/3 cup. And this one has the 1 and the line and the 4, 1/4 cup or 1/4 cup. So those are for dry goods. And this one is for liquids, like water or milk or oil. And it has the fractions on the side. At the top, it is 1 cup. But on the way to the top, it has the fractions. 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1 cup. And then we have the measuring spoons. and they say on them what they are. This one says 1 tablespoon. The next one down is 1 teaspoon. Then comes 1/2 teaspoon, the 1 in the line and the 2. Then 1/4 teaspoon. That's going to come into handy for anything where there's a small amount of it. It can be dry or wet. Okay, so it may seem like a small difference, but when you are reading a recipe, it's really important to figure out which part of it says teaspoon and which part says tablespoon. And unfortunately, in this recipe, the only difference is one little letter, the letter B. So the short way of writing teaspoon is TSP, that's the smaller one. And the short way of writing tablespoon is TBSP. Really notice these things, otherwise you're gonna get your ingredients wrong. So this one says teaspoon, that one says tablespoon. That one says tablespoon, this one says teaspoon. And over here, it says tablespoon. So that way we can really make sure we're using the right size of spoon to measure our ingredients. Another thing you might find if you're looking at recipes is that tablespoon might just be a big capital T, and teaspoon might be a little lowercase t, and it might be a little bit bent at the bottom. So now that we've figured out our fractions and we've figured out what tablespoons and teaspoons are, we can finally make the scones. So quite often in ingredients, especially in baking, they want you to put all the dry ingredients into one bowl, all the wet ingredients into another bowl, and then combine them. So it's time for the dry ingredients. And remember, it was 1 2/3 cup of flour. So we take the 1 cup, and the way that you want to do dry ingredients is at first you fill it too full on purpose, and then you take a butter knife and turn it upside down so that the flat part is facing down, and that's the flat part that you're going to use to level it off. So all the extra goes back in to the flour bin, and there is 1 level cup of flour. And then we need 2/3. So remember, we're going to find the one that says 1/3, 1 line 3, and we're going to do it 2 times because that'll be 2/3. So again, I make it too full and level it off, and make it too full and level it off. Okay, there's the flour. Next we have 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking powder is different from baking soda. Doink. Baking soda looks like this, baking powder looks like that. Some recipes use one, some use the other, some use both. This one has just baking powder. It's confusing, they both start with the word baking. Okay, so 2.5 teaspoons. Teaspoons are the smaller ones. And this one, the rim of the container has this flat spot on purpose to help you with that. Same thing that we did with a knife. You make it the spoon too full, you level it off using that flat part. There is 1 teaspoon. Here are 2 teaspoons, and then the 1/2 teaspoon. The 1 and the line and the 2. So there's your 1/2 teaspoon. And that makes, yes, 2.5. 2.5 teaspoons baking powder. This is what makes it rise in the oven. Oh, and I forgot to say, before you start, go ahead and preheat the oven. For this one, the oven preheats to 400 degrees. And that's something that a parent will help you with. Okay, our next dry ingredient is sugar. Here's the sugar. This time it's tablespoons, the bigger one. 3 tablespoons of sugar. And you can either do the same thing with that knife, or you can just sort of shake it a little so it seems to be about level. Depends on how exact you feel like being. I'll be exact. 3 tablespoons of sugar. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's, oh, and a pinch of salt. And a pinch is just however much you get between your fingers. A pinch of salt. Yay. All right, and now to mix those together, for dry ingredients, I like to mix with a whisk. All right, so the next ingredient is 3 tablespoons of butter. Butter is a little bit different. You don't want to try to shove it into the tablespoon. What's nice about butter is that on a butter stick, it actually says 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons, all the way to the end, 8 tablespoons. So you can just see how many are 3 tablespoons and cut straight down, and that'll be the right amount. So here are my 3 tablespoons, and what you want to do actually is work it in with your very clean hands. So you use your fingers. So you just squishy, squishy, squishy. It's really kind of fun, you guys, until it's evenly distributed, and it's kind of like coarse sand. It'll be like the sand that you use to make a sand castle. Make sure you get any big lumps out. And it all is pretty evenly distributed. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna wash my hands again. Okay, so the butter is all incorporated, and our very last thing into the dry ingredients is the zest of 1 lemon. And this is a zester. If you don't have a zester, maybe you have a grater. A grater with small holes would work, a cheese grater, or one of these graters that has lots and lots of sides. This side would work well. And the interesting thing about a lemon is, I'm gonna put on my glasses to see really closely. The yellow part is the part you want. It's quite yummy. Just under a very thin layer of the yellow is the white part. And the white part is called the pith, and it's very bitter. So you don't want to get the white part, just the yellow. So you use your zester or your grater, and you just take 1 or 2 swipes and then move it. 1 or 2 swipes and move it. You want to keep moving it, otherwise if you keep zesting in the same spot, you're going to get down to that yucky white layer of the pith. Okay, so there it all is. And I'm just gonna get it all into the dry ingredients and mix it up. Okay, it's time for the wet ingredients in a separate bowl. All right, so now 1/2 cup of milk. And milk is a liquid, so we're going to use our liquid measure. And when you do a liquid measure, you need to get your body down to where the line is that you're looking for. And we want the 1/2, the 1 in the line and the 2, and that is here. So it's actually easier on the counter, and you put your body down low, and you stop when you see the liquid get up to that mark. All right, so in goes 1/2 cup of milk. Now we need a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. This one is my 1/2 teaspoon. hold it over the bowl in case of a spill, and I go really slowly because it can easily pour over the top of the spoon. And then 1 egg. When you crack an egg, if you haven't done it before, you always crack it into a separate bowl in case something goes wrong, like a bunch of shell pieces go in. Then you have a chance to get out the shell pieces before you put it into your main ingredients. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tap the edge of the shell on the edge of the bowl a couple times, and then I'm gonna put both of my thumbs into that place that I tapped and pull apart, and then the egg comes out. And this is very good to practice. You're gonna need to know when you grow up how to crack an egg. There's the place for my thumbs. Oop, there's a piece of shell already. Put the thumbs in, pull apart, and out comes the egg. All right, that looks good. I can put it in. All right, and then it says to whisk it all together. Great. Okay, so we have our wet ingredients and we have our dry ingredients. And we can put them together with the cranberries, and then we're gonna immediately put them out so we can cut them into scones. All right, now it said to put the wet ingredients together with the dry ingredients and the cranberries. So in go the wet ingredients. It says 3/4 of a cup of dried cranberries. So you can take your 1/4 cup and do it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. But guess what? There's a shortcut. If you want 3/4, 1, 2, 3, it's the same as 1/2 and 1/4. So that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do a 1/2 cup and a 1/4 cup. But either way, it works just fine. My cranberries are kind of big. They're big whole ones. The ones that you get will probably be chopped smaller. Either way. Okay, so here's the 1/2 cup. And here's the 1/4 cup. Okay, so we're gonna mix it up, and then I'll show you how we will make the scones. Hooray! You just mix it till it's mixed. It says do not overwork the dough or you'll have tough scones. So just until it's mixed. Okay, now we're gonna put some flour out on the counter, and then put all that lovely mixed dough out on the counter. And it says it will be a wet dough, so we're not gonna worry about that. All right. Now it said put flour on top. Just a little shaky shake. So that you can press it down and make sort of a, it said to make it round. I don't know how that's necessarily important. But that way you get it all together in about the same width. All right, and now we're gonna cut the scones and put them on the baking sheet. And traditionally, scones are cut into triangles. I'm gonna make mine sort of small. I should add that I am not much of a cook. But the good thing about scones is they're very easy and they're pretty forgiving. And see how sticky this dough is? That's okay, it's supposed to be sticky. Okay, so did I mention that I'm really not much of a cook? I'm not much of a cook. So maybe your scones will look a little prettier. I made mine small, maybe yours will be bigger. I made mine blobby, maybe yours will have a better shape to them. But anyway, there it is. Okay, so now before I put these into the oven, because they really don't take very long to cook, they take about 12 minutes, and mine might take less because they're smaller. I want to make the glaze because it says that the glaze should sit for half an hour to thicken up a little bit. Okay, so our glaze is made from the zest of half a lemon, and I already did that. So there's the half the lemon zest, in it goes. And 2/3 of a cup of powdered sugar. And here's our 1/3 cup, and we do it 2 times. And I'm not going to be as exact. There we go. I flattened it out. 1/3, 2/3. And then 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. I used the lemon that I had zested earlier for the scones dough. I did cut it in half. You can ask a parent to help you cut it. And it does say if you need more juice after you put it in, oops, a little spilly. You put in 1 tablespoon and you see how it goes. And if it needs more, you add more. And if it's too runny, I can definitely see we need more. And if it's too runny, then you add more sugar. So this is just sort of a balancing act between the juice and the sugar. Okay, now we're cooking. Okay, so this is sort of the drizzly kind of consistency that you might want. All right, so that's gonna sit, and we're gonna cook the scones, and then we can drizzle the sweetness on top of them. All right, time to put them in. Make sure you use your oven mitts and set your timer. All right, so I took them out using the mitts and I let them cool, and it took just a little less than the 12 minutes. They were smaller, so they took about 10 minutes. And now that they've cooled, we can drizzle them. It says to dip them, so you can do that, or you can drizzle with our wonderful glaze. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be delicious. I wish you guys could be here and try these. So for follow-up work, what I want you each to do is find a cookbook and look through it. You can also look at recipes online if you don't have a cookbook at home handy. And I want you to try reading the recipe. And I want you to work out what the fractions are and figure out teaspoon and tablespoon. And then if you want to, find a recipe that works for your family, that you have the ingredients for, or you can easily get the ingredients for, and that you have the equipment for. And then, you know, with a little bit of help, because of the oven, and maybe with cutting, make something. It doesn't have to be this recipe, but it could be if you want. All right, have fun. This is the recipe that I used in case you want to do just what I did.